Good evening, everyone. My name is Yitz Epstein. I'm a life coach at the Psychological Healing Center. I'm replacing Dr. Judy tonight on Dr. Judy WTF as she is away celebrating her birthday. We wish her a huge happy birthday tonight. In addition, we wish Dr. Judy and all the moms out there a happy Mother's Day. This Sunday is Mother's Day, and this is a huge shout out to all the moms out there for all the wonderful work that you guys do. Tonight's show is Happy Narcissistic Mother's Day, Contact versus No Contact. This is part 2 from last week, and we will be having a case study with a wonderful volunteer named Robert, who is going to join us shortly and share his experiences dealing with a narcissistic mother. Before we begin, just a couple of announcements I want to make. First of all, the Mind Map video series is available, if you guys don't know, and that is the entire mind map in video form Dr. Judy goes through, and it's a wonderful tool which could be combined with a life coach or therapist or Dr. Judy to help you along your journey. In addition, anybody who is struggling to recover from narcissistic abuse or any form of childhood disconnects and wounds, please reach out for a free 15-minute consultation. Let us know what's going on in your life, and we can help you out. We can go through the mind map together. In addition, anybody who's watching receives if you would like, a free PDF of Dr. Judy's book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, a wonderful read and a book that goes into depth the mind map system. So, to begin, the narcissistic mothers are mothers who lack empathy, and they do not have the ability to properly love their children and anyone else for that matter. And what happens is that the narcissistic mother is existing for themselves. They want to be there to get their needs met, and anyone in their vicinity is there to help serve those needs. And obviously this poses a massive issue with regards to those around them, specifically their children. And the problem is mostly because the child needs to get their needs met, and they are completely helpless in childhood without any ability to get those needs met. And when a mother is being selfish in this way and self-absorbed, then the child is going to then be forced to serve the parents' needs with little resources to begin with, as opposed to the opposite, which is the healthy way that it should be. And before we do get into the topic, I want to go over the mind map very quickly. For those who aren't aware of how the mind map system works, there is 9 panels. Dr. Judy created this very system, which is designed to identify childhood wounds and paradigm shift, or I should say heal those childhood wounds, identify emotional reactions and core beliefs that were created from those childhood wounds. So if you look at the first 3 panels, you're going to see panel 1, which is the wound. Panel 2 is the reaction to that very wound, and the encoding, which is the belief system, the core beliefs, the baseline of reality for this individual. Now, the wounds are different types. There are different forms of wounds. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, abandonment, and smothering. And from those wounds, there's going to be an extreme reaction, which could include shutting down, disassociating, self-destructive tendencies, whatever it is that the child will experience after this wound, which then will lead to a core belief that is created because of this. The core belief may look like not good enough, not successful enough, not pretty enough, not wealthy enough, just simply not good enough, not enough to be cared for in the proper way. This is a belief that the child then creates, which to make sense really of their reality and traumas, which most of the time are going to be false and usually destructive and negative. If this is the case in childhood, it leads to the 3 middle panels, which is present day, which consists of chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. Chaos is what happens when you are living in a false world, in a false paradigm. Reality becomes completely distorted and eventually leads to chaos, where you do not understand the symptoms going on. Usually in this panel, there are symptoms such as depression, anxiety, frustration, anger, sadness, and any form of confusion as to why reality is not making any sense. This will lead to a certain need to control the situation or feel in control, which is defenses. Defense mechanisms are a way to protect the individual from feeling like they are vulnerable and potentially can get wounded again. Because of the chaos, the wounds seem to be exposed at that point, and defenses are a way to protect the individual from getting re-injured. Defense mechanisms include anything from alcohol, drugs, to codependency and full-blown narcissism, which eventually creates a breakdown because defense mechanisms are unsustainable. Breakdowns are essentially any form of reality falling apart, divorce, when there's a job loss, anytime that there's a simply inability to coexist with other people, usually in the form of quarrels and clashes. At this point in time, there's going to be a choice. The choice is to either go back to panel 1 and repeat the very same childhood programming and the repetition of the dysfunction, or shift into panel 7. Panel 7, 8, and 9 is the future, because in order to create a healthy life, there has to be a sense of connection, human connection. And Dr. Judy's book, Healing Human Disconnect, is predicated on this idea that human connection is health. That's how we are healthy, but not necessarily with other people, mostly beginning with ourselves. So by connecting with ourselves and creating health and connection between ourselves and our past and the fragments of ourselves, of ourself, we can truly become one healthy individual, which leads to healing, which is panel 8. Panel 8 is when we start to almost redesign our DNA. You can see the DNA strands where we start to live in a healthy place, where we start doing things that are in the moment and much healthier. We start to self-love and take care of ourselves, and we start to put ourselves first, and which eventually, when that's done, will lead to a connection with ourselves and then eventually with other people, which is how we heal human disconnect. Now, the narcissistic mothers, we're going to mind map Robert shortly. He's going to call in and we're going to discuss the very issues with narcissism and narcissistic mothers and how this wound gets created in how the narcissistic mother creates wounds in childhood, which eventually create extreme dysfunction, which lasts, if not healed and worked throughout life. So narcissistic mothers create wounds in the child that oftentimes are invisible. There's oftentimes neglect, because if the parent is putting themselves first, well, the child is not being put first, and that is a sort of abandonment, emotional abandonment. In addition, the putting needs of the parent on the child will create a sort of smothering effect, because the child will now feel extremely obligated to fulfill needs that are simply inappropriate for that child. This creates an extreme amount of pressure where the child's needs and sense of self becomes squashed and smothered. This is another form of wounding that usually takes place with regards to narcissistic mothers. And looks like we have a call-in. What is your name? And thank you so much for calling in.
Hey, Yitz, this is Robert.
Robert, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us tonight and volunteering. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to be on, and you did an excellent job with the mind map.
Thank you. I appreciate that greatly, and it really is an honor for us to have you on, and thank you for volunteering. Robert, maybe you can go into a little bit about your experiences with a narcissistic mother and how it was like growing up.
It was very cold. It was very distant. It was very everything you described. It was verbal. There was also neglect, and one time, she got physical, and it was intimidating. She was not someone to mess with or reckon with, however you want to put it. Very tough. My dad, more overt. My dad was covert. So
okay, so
it was double dungeon effect.
I can imagine. So you said a covert or an overt narcissistic mother and a covert narcissistic father, correct?
Right, who's also a con artist and pathological psychopath. So, but we're going to talk about the mother. So yes.
Sure. Yeah, I can only imagine the experience and talk a little bit about what's that like. What does that mean, first of all, having a narcissistic mother? A lot of people out there who have not had narcissistic mothers may not really understand the effects of it. Talk a little bit about what that's like. What does it mean having a narcissistic mother?
Well, there's no love. There's no warmness. You don't expect nothing. You get the vampire effect, and it's too much is never enough. You didn't call enough. Argue over little things. There's fights. There's clashes. It's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. You're always on edge, and it's not pleasant. It's not warm or loving. It's cold.
I mean, I'm sure, because ultimately this is your mother, and your mother,
Right.
we lean on mothers for some of our deepest needs: affection, comfort, compassion, and empathy. And when these things are lacking, so let's talk about panel one. What do you feel like are your panel one wounds because of this, having this narcissistic mother?
I would say mostly all the ones you mentioned, pretty much.
Sure. So you would say outside of the smothering and abandonment, there's other ones as well, correct?
Spoiling, the verbal, uh, physical. There wasn't much. She could be very aggressive and very screaming, loud, and shrilling. And it was a very hostile environment, and it was scary at times. And I'm 39. I don't deal with her. I've done the no contact, which really did work. Is working the best, but this holiday's coming up, which is, and then there's Christmas and all, which is a different story. But it, they're just American holidays at this point. When there's no love, you don't need to be vampired.
Yeah, and obviously, holidays, all of them, most of them, but specifically Mother's Day is a time when you want to reach out and connect to and show thanks. So maybe you can describe a little bit about, before we get into panel two, describe a little bit about what that's like to have a day when everyone else seems to be celebrating their parents, and here you are, really understanding that you can't even talk to them. You've gone no contact, or I should say your mom.
Well, after this whole year of studying grieving the parents you don't have, is specifically, anyone who didn't watch it should watch it. So that wasn't the parent. So you can't grieve someone you could grieve someone you didn't have, but she was never the loving, kind person. So what their experience, I don't know what their experience. I'm sure it's nice, but that's not me. That was not my experience, and I can't speak for them. I can speak for myself. What's it like? I mean, I'm sure for them it's everything you see, in a Hallmark movie, something like that. I don't identify with that.
Sure. So to you,
Not my experience.
This
That
is
warm,
your
loving,
Yeah, this is your only reality. This is what you know, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, so in a sense, it's like, well, this is all you know, so you don't really feel like you're missing out, correct?
Well, at the time, you don't feel like you're missing out. This is normal.
Sure. And I can only imagine the decision to go no contact. First of all, how long ago did you go no contact?
Well, it happened last year when I realized, when I broke away from the family business that I was in, which was a nightmare in itself. But I broke away and I realized how cold and sadistic she is, and it was the best. But then my dad got sick, and then I had to go back and forth and break contact, but completely from this whole year was no contact, just certain text messages. And I only live not that far away from her, so let's add that. Like, she could just drive right by me, but who cares?
Sure. And I mean, did you think about the decision a while before, or did you just decide one day that's it? I can only imagine the actual decision to be made was difficult.
Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't difficult. It was actually at the rock bottom when you feel this coldness and something's not right. You do your own research because you want to heal. And I stumbled upon the show for the past year and a half, and the narcissist mother, everything about that on the children, as well as the father, was me completely. And that's what I identify with, and that's what I realized, to break down these negative core beliefs, because that's what they are. They're just lies. And that could be a holiday for people, loving their mother and flowers and all. But to me, it's more, and wait for the next day. And no contact means self-preservation for my own sanity and soul. I mean, it's a vampiring effect. It's
Right.
What have you done for me? And too much was never enough. You can't, it's a bottomless pit that you're going to serve, and you're just going to feel worse in the long run. There's always going to be something wrong. with you.
You can never get it right. You can never be the son, the child that you want to be for mom. So let's talk about those panel.
And I was told that as well.
Yeah.
I was told that as well.
Yeah. And
Go
ahead. So the core beliefs, and we'll get to those core beliefs shortly, is panel 3, where, you start to believe that maybe you're just not good enough. You're not able to get the job done. Let's before we get to panel 3, let's talk about the reactions to all these woundings. And those reactions are probably showing up today, or really on a daily basis, where we react to triggers. What would you say are some of those reactions that you have to being triggered now because of those wounds?
Well, I haven't been triggered lately because of the knowledge and awareness of all of these lies that were put upon me, and that was why I believed and felt the way I did, because of these lies. But at the time, it was mostly certain PTSD, or if there was loud noises, highly sensitive, and very much behavior. But then to be on edge and to cringe up and to know when she's around, not be there, or be on, like the episode Walking on Eggshells. And you have to do that for your own sanity, and inside you're burning up because you just can't wait to leave. It's a
Sure.
ugly position.
Yeah. So when you're constantly on guard because you never know where the threat comes from, it's almost like you're at war, where you got to be careful. You never know where the next threat is. In PTSD,
dagger, or just the dagger,
Sure.
insult.
Yeah, 100%. I can imagine.
Anything.
I can imagine extreme hypervigilance and having difficulty to trust. You feel like in many sense you got to watch out for people because you never know who can be covert, narcissistic.
Who could hurt you? And it was always like that for the longest time growing up. And the more educated I was, the more I became aware of how much of a horrible system it created, and how things could have been different. Certain doors could have been open to meeting certain people, but certain things were shut down because of just the initial fear and not feeling safe. And it opens up such a panel of destruction, which is not fair for anybody to endure. And it's a horrible treatment. Childhood is a hostage situation.
It really is. It really is, because ultimately, if you're being hurt by the people who are supposed to protect you, and then who are you supposed to reach out to? And ultimately, you're right. It's a dungeon, a darkness. There's really nowhere to turn to, and you are forced to experience these wounds. There's nowhere to go. You're forced to react, and then there's no one to really soothe these reactions. And then along comes panel 3, where our mind starts to try to make sense of our reality. Let's talk about these core beliefs that you feel were created because of being tortured and mistreated in this way by your own mother.
Ugly, stupid, not good enough, not smart enough. You'll never be the son I will be proud of, no matter what you do, how you look. You can never be good enough. So it was just this feeling of, it was a horrible feeling to endure by someone that isn't worthy of even, it's sad to not even know what they're doing, and they're raising a kid, they're screwing them with their head in such a negative, horrible way. It's totally abusive behavior to just make it all about them. And you look, and there's always a dirty look in the face. And
absolutely. And so with all these core beliefs, and obviously, it's not just, I think this about myself. It starts to dictate everything that you do. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how this has affected you today. I mean, do you still feel a lot of these core beliefs going on today? And or have you really worked to dismantle them?
I've worked to dismantle them through the mind map, through all of the series, and through the knowledge that it wasn't my fault. It was lies set upon me, and it was mistreatment, horrible mistreatment. Verbal, physical, neglect, just a slap in the face for nothing. I tried to be the best kid because I had a sister who was the golden child. I became the scapegoat, and then because I knew that the treatment was wrong, something inside of me just I had that gut instinct, and then I just had to walk on eggshells, and it was an uncomfortable experience. But this is the first year that I officially am not even going to send a text or even acknowledge, and I was very conflicted about it. But looking at what am I going to give to someone that brought me nothing but misery, it's I'm going to get misery out of it, and I don't want that because it could open up that little. It could reinfect the wound, and I worked too hard to feel good about myself and educate myself, not to put myself in a situation where it's 20 questions, but I'm constantly seeking to just better myself and realize, know these words, map it out, and the game is up, the jig is up. That this person's going to mistreat you. You can't expect nothing nice out of them. So, and it's pretty much how it is.
Yeah, it
I know
really is.
how my father's a liar, and he would only want something out of me. I won't expect nothing more, and just the knowledge is empowering to not expect nothing, because people always expect something and they get hurt, but they keep doing it. And I was one of those people, the people pleaser, and then I felt myself getting suctioned, vampired, and almost physically exhausted, mentally drained, and to the point that I, you know, between the screaming, there was always so much nervous energy. It was taking the life out of me, At times, I had to get away for my own soul, for my own self-worth. What was left at the time, because they could really play a number.
And many people don't really fully understand the effects of having narcissistic parents, mostly because unless you've experienced it, it's quite chaotic. It's quite bizarre, because you don't. It's not just an assault. It's not just a hitting, or it's not a one-time incident. It's the overall energy of the room. It's the existence of your childhood.
The tone.
100%. It's the attitude.
It's everything. It's as soon as you walk into a room, it's just a cold energy. It's not warm. And for the people that don't understand it, I that's wonderful for them that they had the nurturance. But for the people that do probably know exactly what I'm feeling. And when you get to that point, I'm 39, so I still have some years left to me. I don't want to put myself in that position. I use the analogy, hugging her could be like hugging a chair, and which is very cold, because there's no love, there's no connection. Last time I seen her could have been Christmas, and it was just very cold and very distant, and I didn't really enjoy that day. So,
Sure.
And now it's Mother's Day, and I went no contact, and I have to focus on my own well-being. And when people take that away from you, and it does come from the family, and then you project it into humanity when you step into the world. I mean, I did. I'm speaking for myself only. When you step into the world, you have that glitch, that hole in your soul, that insecurity. You let the door open for more assaults from other people, including your peers, your environment. So it really creates such damage, and they could be so. She was always aggressive. What's your problem? And it was always my fault. And it was normal behavior to walk on eggshells and to not trust the world. And that's pretty. That pretty sums up the mind map when the damage is done. And I was actually thinking about this one incident when she slapped me, and it was the first time, and then for the rest, I was pretty much scared of her. And it was something really stupid. I was outside playing, and I haven't thought of this. And think I fell in the mud, and she told me to get a shower, and I was like, oh, I said Jesus, because I was nervous of her anger, and she slapped me and said, don't ever say that. And then I was always just, she did call me every name in the book, weird, ugly, well, not ugly until, not overtly ugly, more covertly, like,
Robert,
just
Robert,
insults.
let me quickly interrupt. Robert, we do have a phone call, and I want to invite them on to ask you myself a question. So just stop. Let me just interrupt you right there. We'll continue with that, okay?
Absolutely.
Hi, welcome to Dr. Judy Tell BTF. What is your name?
Maureen.
Hi, Maureen. You're on with Yitz and Robert. How are you?
Okay, fine.
So what is your question about narcissistic mothers?
Well, I don't know. I just thought I'd tell some of my story that, around Mother's Day, it really, well, I live the suffering too, but,
Have you gone no contact, or are you still in contact with your mother?
my mother died a few years ago, but I still, it's like she still haunts me every single day.
Let me just ask you to turn your volume down, please, in your car, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, is that better?
That is. Thank you so much.
Okay. But anyways, but sometimes I get stressed out, and then, they're all of a sudden she's there, like she's alive there. Let's say I'm at the health club trying to hurry up and get ready for my water workout, and and she's there. Come on, what's taking you so long? And just always disrespectful, and never standing up for me my whole life. And I thought it was. I guess I just thought that you think your parents are normal, and at least I did. And then anyway, sitting there with the in the teacher-parent conference, and of course never to stick up for me. And you know what? I saw Jane Eyre, the movie, recently, just briefly. Anyways, I mean, her generation was like that, where they would be so stern, so cruel, and a child is just to be obedient. And they made that little girl at 8 or 9 years old, stand out in the rain on a chair because, I don't know, it seemed pretty insignificant, whatever she had done. But that's the era that I guess she came from. But my mother was so self-centered. I'm an artist. I'd go to a gallery. She'd want to come along, and she wouldn't stand up for me even in the gallery. Trying to get work in there, and oh well, of course I could just go on and on and on and on.
Sure. Well, that's just how narcissistic mothers operate, and obviously Robert is discussing as well about the self-centeredness and the inability to empathize and care for their children, and it doesn't stop after childhood. It keeps going on into adulthood, and it doesn't end. It continues. So Maureen, thank you so much for calling in, and if you would like a consultation, please reach out. We work with many people who have struggled with these types of wounding and you're right, it's cruel, it's cold, and it leaves you with a confusing sense of really what's healthy and what's not. And one of the things we do is we start to identify what is healthy and what is not. What does it mean to have a narcissistic mother? What are the effects, and how is this affected the way you think, the way you believe, the way you see life and reality? So please reach out if you'd like to work through some of the wounding from that. Okay?
Okay. I will, and I thank you so much. I look forward to that.
Of course, our pleasure. Thank you so much. And also, if you'd like a PDF of Dr. Judy's book, we'd love to get you that as well.
Okay, and I have it, and it's a marvelous book. It is so good, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And I feel like I am healing. I'm getting healthy, healthier every day, just this insight, but I'm definitely going to call and get some, because I have gone to shrinks before, and they just were a waste of time. One person was snoring, and they didn't really care. They didn't talk about any of this kind of stuff, and to work on my courage and my self-esteem or any of it. So I trust you guys, and I'm grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words. And yes, I obviously feel so strongly about the mind map and Robert as well, because ultimately, unless we go to the cause of what is going on below the surface, what is going on in the psyche, how did this lack of empathy, how did this extremely dysfunctional childhood not just create symptoms, but how did it affect the way we see, how do we think, and how do we interact and communicate in relationships? And ultimately, unless we do that, we really can't heal. We can't move on, because it always comes back to those childhood wounds. And in this case, specifically with narcissistic mothers, the effects are devastating, and we need to work through those wounds in order to heal.
Good, because I'd like to find out who I really am, who I would be if I didn't have this,
Yes.
history.
Well, that's
100%.
what haunts us is to think what could have happened had they been different, and you realize that that's just the card we were dealt, and they were injured themselves. So that's
Right.
you try not to. I try not to let that haunt me. How things could have been different, because it did bother me for a while. The damage.
Yes,
Right.
and
Trusting people and.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because I don't have that much time left. Maybe 20 years. You know what I mean? 25. Anyway.
Yes, and
Okay, well,
the cliche of it's not how you begin, it's how you finish. Well, ultimately, it is how you finish, and it's never too late, I believe, to heal those wounds and create, get in touch with who you truly are and create the outcome for your life that you deserve. So please definitely reach out, and we'll be in touch. And thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So Robert, let's continue with panel 4. Talk a little bit about panel 4, 5, and 6 is present day. There's chaos in life because of these childhood wounds that don't go away, which then leads to obviously the defense mechanisms and breakdowns in relationships and life itself. So talk about what's going on today because of what has happened to you. Start with the chaos of eventually realizing that you're at a place where you have to go no contact. Talk about the maybe leading up to going no contact and how it's been since then.
Yeah, it was a gradual lay up to it, especially with my dad and my sister, who my mother created the sibling rivalry. Both parents did the flying monkey effect with my sister, and through knowledge really is power, and just knowing what is going on, that this isn't normal behavior. It's not normal to be around someone and feel nervous all the time and just because they're related to you. It's not, and your body gives you signals, and you always try not to follow it because of what society says, oh, it's a holiday, oh, do this. And especially with culture, certain cultures are more ingrained in others, about family, so it did affect, especially with the isms, smoking was a big one of them, in my teenage years, and drinking was one of them, which was prevalent in the household as well. So I looked upon that even as normal behavior. And then you realize that it's not normal behavior. So they inflict such wounds, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would do that. So they have to be injured at one point. So I don't, I just have to protect myself and just at least do the repair for the time being and get to know me. Enough has been stolen already, I believe. And I think a lot of people do feel the same way.
Yeah, it does come down to putting yourself first, and not because it's not selfish. It's, in fact, it's extremely healthy, and because you've spent so much time looking after mom and trying to be there for her, trying to fulfill her needs, which is completely inappropriate, obviously, for even regardless of age. It's just you're supposed to be taken care of. And ultimately, it comes down to putting yourself first. So just to tail off very quickly about going no contact versus staying in contact with mom, the decision ultimately is made by whoever has the mother, because no one can tell another person whether they should go no contact or not. But as you, Robert, mentioned a couple times, you have to put yourself first. You have to pay attention to how you feel. You have to pay attention to the effect it's having you on in your daily life. And if you don't, ultimately, then you are going to be continuously sucked back into the dysfunction. We do have a call-in. So, Robert, we're going to continue with the next panel shortly. But hi, welcome to Dr. Judy WTF. What is your name?
Hi, how are you, Mr. Yitz?
I'm good. How are you? What's your name?
My name is Samuel.
Hey, Samuel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, no problem. Now, when you say like a narc mother, you think somebody he's like a narcissistic, you know?
Correct. Well, there's somebody who has narcissistic tendencies, all the way to a full-blown mother who lacks 100% empathy. So within that context, yes.
Okay, my mom used to beat me and call me nigger. So, I mean, is that kind of narcissistic?
That would be considered extremely abusive. Narcissistic, the specific narcissism that we're talking about is where there's a lack of empathy. It's a subtle, slow really abuse that happens over a long period of time. So in that case, I would say that's more verbal. If beat you, that would be physical. So there are different forms of childhood abuse, but in that specific case, those are certainly narcissistic tendencies. Your mom is not thinking about your well-being, which is obviously selfish, but the specific narcissistic mothers we're talking about isn't necessarily that realm. It's more of the gaslighting, the subtle, silent treatment, the mental, emotional, subtle abuse. But yeah, I mean, that certainly it's extraordinarily abusive. So I would say that's highly narcissistic, abuse.
So you study these? Do you do your own research, or do you learn from other people?
Well, we have studied all staff at the psychological. We've done a lot of research. A lot of us have experienced in our personal life, and we've worked with a lot of people who have described what it's like to grow up in a home with narcissism and narcissistic abuse. We're very aware of the dynamics, and a lot of times, a lot of narcissistic abuse a lot of times goes under the radar because most clinicians aren't necessarily fully aware of it. Mostly because unless you've gone through it, it's hard to identify what it means to have narcissistic tendencies, narcissistic abuse, because a lot of times it's really unseen. It's not visual. A lot of times it's subtle, covert. The silent treatment, for example, that's very sneaky and subtle, and a lot of times it could be seen as, mom's in a bad mood and she doesn't want to talk to anyone for a month. Well, yeah, but it's also a form of narcissism and narcissistic abuse because it fundamentally disrespects and destroys the psyche of who's being, so to speak, mistreated in that way.
Oh, okay, I understand. So it's
All right.
just it's a mental, but it can also be like a physical thing, correct?
It can include physical, correct. Did you what are your experiences? Have you had a narcissistic mother? What are your experiences with that?
Yeah, I mean, my mom a lot of times just kind of put me and my brother off to the side. She kind of kept to herself. She didn't really want to have children. She called us nigger a lot. I'm not sure why. Sure.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, that's certainly wounding, and I want to invite you to call us, for a 15-minute consultation, as well as if you'd like to read Dr. Judy's book. We'd love to help you work through those wounds, because ultimately, if we don't address it, we don't identify it and work to heal it, it does affect us long term. Not necessarily if it's narcissistic abuse, but also if it's any form of childhood wounds. So thank you so much, for calling in, and definitely be in touch to if you'd like to help work through the mind map system to heal that. Okay?
All right. Thanks so much, nigger. Have a great day.
Okay, Samuel. Have a good night. So, Robert, to continue, the mind map continues with panel 5, which is the defense mechanisms. So, talk a little bit about your experiences with defense mechanisms and what defenses you created because of having a narcissistic mother.
Well, I always, once I reached my teens and I graduated, and then I became in my early 20s, I basically, I did adopt smoking, which a lot of people did or still do at the time. I don't know. But alcohol was a big factor, just to go out and to meet new people. But then it was also readily available at the house growing up, and always seeing the mother, somebody always drinking in the house. And it made me, I noticed they would push it on me. My dad would always give it to me to basically shut me up, so you don't say nothing. Oh, here, drink this. And then before I knew it, like, they almost self-imposed that. Well, they didn't almost, they did. And until I realized from other people that that's not really cool behavior, that's when I kind of woke up. And you realize that how people really do want your downfall in life. And sadly enough, they're the people that we trust the most. And we are conditioned to think that mom is the quintessential mother, of everything. And she's really not. And by the way you feel inside, and just this knowledge is just breaking new boundaries, and it's giving people a lot to think about, because it's not our fault. We're told this, and we're made to feel that way.
100% correct.
Should be allowed to be,
Yeah,
just
and
be who they are without being judged.
You're 100% right, and it's totally destructive, because what it does is it doesn't allow the child a sense of foundational existence to then build themselves a sense of self, and you really are left to your own devices. And of course, you're going to create elaborate defenses. Narcissism. What is narcissism? The reason why narcissistic abuse continues generationally is because narcissists create such extreme toxic environments for the child and for those around, that they have to create a shell to protect themselves. So did you find yourself maybe even creating or having some narcissistic tendencies or even some codependent tendencies where you were forced to then protect yourself from what was going on?
Yes, I did.
Sure.
With both.
And that would be completely expected.
Exactly, because it was almost about just how can I protect myself. The world, it just became very, when you're around it as much as you are at the time, even if it's for a couple hours, it could really take the life out of you, and you are lost if you just keep, if you don't break away from that. It just takes away so much out of your psyche, your whole DNA structure. You start to notice things feeling different. You have a headache, you just feel tired, you just feel completely drained, and it's a horrible feeling. And just being away from it is knowledge in itself of how good it feels to not have that poison in my life that was all about them. Everything will always be about them. And that's what I realize. And
yeah, no question about it. And that would lead to then panel 6, which is breakdowns, because you're right, your body starts to break down, your mind starts to break down, your relationship with yourself, and then obviously your relationships with other people become chaotic, because of course, we talked about before about being wary of other people's intentions and attitudes, because ultimately they could be narcissistic as well. This leads to that disconnect, which ultimately leads to the defenses, which lead to then breakdowns, which obviously is a huge disconnect. So talk about, if you can, Robert, talk a little bit about your work through the mind map and how you have been dealing with your breakdowns and perhaps repeating some old patterns or shifting into panel 7.
I would say realizing that I was, even as an adult, in that hostage situation, when it became about family and then them having a business. It was a hostage situation, and you don't know anything other than how to protect yourself. And then once you had enough, you do have enough, and you have to go on that search yourself and find the answer, which is, thank God for, shows like this that educate, which is where I made my paradigm shift to, I've noticed little subtleties in me slowly, gradually, and I've noticed a lot of memories coming into trigger because I did open the door. So
sure, and I'm sure now that you've gone no contact, it's given you the awareness and the space you need to start to see what has happened, so you can then really do the healing work. And again, I'm not suggesting that going no contact is the only way to go, but ultimately, when you start paying attention to yourself and how you feel, you start putting yourself first, then you can start to see that you really need to put aside distractions and people who disrespect your boundaries and don't allow you to be you. Gather yourself together and shift into a healthier place. And in that healthier place, you may or may not be able to include people like your mother in this case, where there's such toxicity and such a lack of respect for who you are.
I have to repeat exactly what you said, the lack of respect of who you are, even as a grown adult. And that no one should put up with that, whether it's their mother, father, sibling, aunt, uncle. Nobody should ever treat lack of respect. We need to respect each other, and it's about human connection, not human disconnect. And everything that she did was created for me human disconnect in every way possible, from not wanting to be around people to not feeling good enough. It created the disconnect, which was toxic. And so we're on,
and we're on panel. So once you get to panel 7, which is where you start to really connect to yourself, which really is the first step towards building a healthier future, then it leads to panel 8. Panel 8 is healing. This is when we really start to get in touch with what we want, who we are as a person, and this is where we start to really put ourselves first and live a life where we are completely in touch with our sense of self. We start to nurture ourselves back to health. We become, so to speak, the parents of our own inner child at this point. And this is exceptionally healing, because ultimately when we're looking to mom, we're looking to dad, we're looking to people around us to give us the things we did not get in childhood, we stay stuck because those people cannot give us the things that we needed. If they could have, they would have. And I know Dr. Judy has an episode where she talks about the injurer injurer cannot be the healer.
Yes.
Going no contact is another way of saying I'm acknowledging that mom will never be able to give me what I need from her, and ultimately the only person who can give that to me is myself. So talk a little bit about how you have been healing yourself by being your own parent, so to speak, now that you've gone no contact.
Well, just by going no contact and by educating myself through narcissism and the toxic family unit, and knowing the players, who's the scapegoat, who's the golden child, how they create sibling rivalry, how when too much is never enough, knowing these terms, these definitions, identifying it, pinpointing it, and then mapping out even yourself for that much, and see how do you fit into all this. And that's where the awakening comes, at least with me, because I did see through all this, everything that was said about my mother was literally about my mother on both shows about narcissistic parents, the previous shows by Dr. Judy, as well as previous research. And it's more about, self-healing and looking at the world through a different eye set, without having the cracked lens of perception, and starting to be able to notice different changes in your own behavior, feeling more open to the world, feeling less shut off. And it happens for me, it's been happening gradually because I'm still learning, and I still, this holiday is coming up, and I this is the first year I am going no contact, so I really am sticking to my ground with this one, because I know that I'm not going to get nothing but negativity back to me. And just to, even what Dr. G said last week, love yourself. I mean, just to give yourself the love that person never gave you, is healing in itself.
It is, and I think you really nailed it, and you eloquently said that exactly what healing is. It's getting clarity. Going no contact is about getting clarity and seeing what is actually going on, as opposed to maybe the indoctrination or brainwashing or whatever core beliefs we were downloaded with from mom or dad. But ultimately, it's getting distance and seeing this is what's actually going on. And as painful as that is to look at, ultimately, this is the truth. And by seeing the truth, you can then heal. You can then take steps to actually align with your truth and gain healing, which the last and final panel is connection, in which really, like you said, it's about connecting to yourself. And when you start to connect to yourself, you realize that you are okay as you are, and that's so healing, and that's so amazingly effective in the healing process, and eventually connecting to other people as well. Because when we are connected to ourselves, when we're connected to other people, we are nourished, we feel safe, we feel heard and understood. All of those things which are not experienced in childhood when you have a narcissistic mother, which, like you perfectly summed up, it is the epitome of disconnect. Narcissistic abuse is the definition of disconnect. It is literally, there's no connection. Every attempt you made, a child makes to connect to a narcissistic parent is really denied and rejected, which ultimately leads to all this wounding and the inability to, or at least the difficulty to connect with oneself and with another. So we are, Robert, almost out of time here. Did you have any last thoughts about if you can share maybe some last thoughts about narcissism, narcissistic mothers, and your journey?
Well, I just want to say to everyone who's out there and who is conflicted, just let your body and your own instincts guide you, because that's what worked for me. And knowledge is power, and I think no contact is a case-by-case study. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. There is light contact. I know people that do light contact, but at the end, if they have that attitude, they're able to be very nonchalant. With me, at this point, I just feel like for my own health and well-being, no contact is just that, for my own health and well-being. And I don't even think she would care, to be honest with you. And that's just how it is. And I thank you for being on the show. And I thank you for even my map and the series has been enlightening for me and so many people.
Of course, our pleasure, Robert. And thank you so much for the courage to come on and talk about your experiences with narcissistic mothers, giving really courage and strength to everyone else out there who is suffering. And now that you can see that the mind map is such a powerful tool, it really is amazing how you can start to map your wounds and gain the healing that you need. So thank you for displaying that for everyone to see. We really deeply appreciate it. Of course, it's our pleasure, Robert. Have a wonderful night.
You too, have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you. So as Robert discussed, and thank you, Robert, for coming on, it's about healing our wounds. It's about healing the disconnects from ourselves, which are created because of trauma, because of the inability to connect to mom. The blueprint of connection was dysfunctional, was toxic. And if you feel the need to go no contact, or if you want to find a way to maintain contact but create a civil relationship, or if you find that you might be able to create a therapeutic relationship where you can enter into therapy and work things out with mom, with dad, with the covert or overt narcissistic parent, please reach out. These wounds they might be invisible, they might be difficult to pinpoint, but ultimately when we start to see it for what it is, we can start to get healing. Clarity, understanding, awareness is the first step. and by mapping it, by seeing where the cause is, by identifying the start, the middle, the finish, we can start to see that everything starts to make sense. We start to become aware that you're not alone in this battle. You're not crazy. You're not, you might feel alone, you might feel crazy. Certainly that's often the case with narcissistic parents, but ultimately there's help, there's healing out there. And please reach out if you are struggling from any form of childhood abuse, any form of childhood disconnect, and specifically narcissistic abuse. I do want to mention, before we jump into our song for tonight, I want to mention that I do run a narcissistic abuse webinar for just $9.95 every other week. So the next one will be in a week from this Sunday. And I also have a live narcissistic abuse recovery meetup in Sherman Oaks as well. That's $9.95 as well. So if you're struggling and you want to feel that connection to other people who are struggling on this journey, it's been a wonderful journey so far of everyone who has joined us, experiencing the connection that we so desperately need and want when you're suffering, especially from narcissism, where you feel like you're completely alone on this journey. There is help, there is connection out there. Let's shine light on the darkness and let's heal human disconnect. So our song tonight is called Farmer's Daughter, and the artist is Crystal Bowersocks. Okay, let's shrink it. Halfway to crazy, not far from sane, effing sick and tired of all your games. All I ever wanted was you to take care of me. Honor thy mother and father too, but I know there ain't no way in hell that God mentioned you. All I ever wanted was you to care for me. Now I'm stuck in this hotel room, your grandson and me. Tomorrow we're going to find out our destiny. All I ever wanted was you to be there for me. All I ever wanted was you to be there for me. So this is just a classic where you have a child who is toying or struggling with the fact that this is their parent, and they know they want to. This is this person's parent, and they want to respect and care about them, and they want the parent to care about her and the grandson. But ultimately, she's starting to see that this is simply not going to be happening. This is just the mother is just too out of touch and too disconnected. This time is the last time you're going to see us around. This was your last chance to prove you wouldn't let me down. So go on, get up going and get away from here. All alone is how you're going to spend the rest of your years. No farmer's daughter anymore, mommy dear. Remember back in high school, my brothers and me? Willie put his head through the door to find clarity. You come home with bourbon breath, Jack in the air. And when you broke my nose, I told the school I fell down the stairs. All I ever wanted was you to be there for me. All I ever wanted was for you to be here for me. Yeah, you have this person's crying out. They're realizing just how much they wanted their parent and ultimately can't have, and they're almost, it sounds like they're going no contact, like go away, get away from here, because the pain of having this person in their life is too overwhelming, and really it sounds like with everything that she doesn't want to make this decision, but ultimately for her sanity needs to make it because of the awareness that she's seeing of the destructive nature of the mother. This time is the last time you're going to see us around. This was your last chance to prove you wouldn't let me down, so go on home, get going, and get away from here. All alone is how you're going to spend the rest of your years. No farmer's daughter anymore. I ain't no farmer's daughter anymore. No farmer's daughter anymore, mommy dear. So simply just giving up on mother and going no contact. So if you are struggling from having a narcissistic mother and you need help, please reach out. I understand the struggle. It's Mother's Day, and this is a time when you're supposed to connect with mom, but ultimately many of us can't. So my thoughts are with you. My prayers are with you. And please know that you are not alone. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Have an excellent, wonderful night, and happy Mother's Day.